I'm rolling underneath the blazer again. I've got some fluid filming done here and there, and I've got a lot more to do. It's a big job, and I do a thorough job. What I'm going to do right now is put the camera on the drive shaft. I'm going to put the flashlight there pointing at the drive shaft, and I'm going to put the camera on the U-joint. What the problem is here, when I bought this truck in Salinas, 2 hours south of San Francisco, this past May, I actually bought it off of Craigslist. Pig in a poke, take a chance, the kid seemed honest, and he was. This is the original U-joint. It still has the injected plastic. That little thing sticking out right there. That's plastic that GM injected into these things when they were new to hold the U-joint in. And when you have to remove the U-joint, you heat it up, the plastic bubbles out, splashes you in the eye, then you wish you would have worn eye protection. When I bought this truck, one of these U-joint caps was sticking out past the yoke, and the other one was in about 1/8 of an inch. So I said, well, that's pretty simple. So I unbolted the drive shaft hooks or straps, and I centered it as best I could and put it back together. The U-joint seemed nice and smooth. And I noticed when I'm servicing the truck 5,000 miles later that one of these U-joint caps was almost flush again. So I said, oh, where's a little nubby that held the thing in when the truck was built? But I don't see any signs of any nubbies. So what I'm doing, what I've done and what I'm doing is put a blob of weld on the yoke, and it won't throw it out of balance very much. I'm going to put the same thing on the other side. I can always grind it down. I don't think it'll matter. It's quite insignificant. I'm going to put a blob of weld right there. So I'm going to set the camera up right here. And I just ordered a whole bunch of different tripods because I'm going on a road trip. Now, is that going to stay or is that going to flop over? I've got a socket holding it in place. And if one socket's good, two socket to-me's are better. I've got another socket right here. I'm going to put another socket to hold this thing up. And I'm going to put it right in front of the lens so you can't see a thing. How does that sound? There we go. It's like a peep show. Pays you money and you get your peeps. So I've got my old trusty MIG welder that I've owned for the good old welder. I bought it in 1989. I've had it for almost 30 years. That's pretty crazy. Too bad they don't make them in Cleveland anymore. They make it in Mexico. Yeah. I'm going to take a wire brush and some brake cleaner, and I'm going to scrub it clean, even though there's no rust on this truck at all. It's amazing. Look at that. You can still see the machining marks on this yoke. I noticed something back when I was 19 or 18 or 19 years old in the late 70s. I noticed that wherever vehicles had oil leaking, they didn't have any rust. So I guess you could say I figured out that vehicles didn't rust wherever you had a little bit of grease to preserve the metal, and that's all fluid film does. A friend of mine in Scotland asked me today, what does fluid film do? I says, it's just like squeezed parquet. It just gives you a little bit of protection from the elements, because if salt can't get to things, then it won't rust. Simple as that. It's as simple as that. You can't have any chemicals, salt, brine, chlorine, whatever the hell they spray on the roads. You can't have it getting to the metal, otherwise it's going to rust. And fluid film does not stop rust. It just holds the rust underneath. You got to hit it before you drive it in the salt, whether it's new or 30-something years old, 34 years old in this Blazer. So I'm going to crank up the welder. I'm going to put a little blob of weld right on the cap to hold it in place. And I hope I've got a good ground here because I didn't grind it smooth. Maybe I'll polish the drive shaft a bit with my dollar store wire brush. Disposable junk from China. I visited a clock maker today. I bought a whole bunch of antique clocks. And I thought I bought them cheap. He said, yeah, nobody wants them anymore. Nobody can fix them. Nobody wants them. I bought a grandmother clock that was made by a guy in 1966 and given as a gift. He wrote it in pencil on the back of the case. Anyways, we oiled it and fired her up and Tick tock, bing bong. Weld and weld we go. Whoa! Woohoo! Uh-oh, I got some grease there too. I guess that's flammable, huh? Who would ever thunk it? Ha! I got my heart racing. I guess if you don't succeed, fry again. Where's the lens on this baby? Well, that was very interesting. Fire in the shop. Luckily, there's only a little bit of grease there, nothing really to catch fire, so let's see if we can get this done and put the fire out before we get burned out of here. Oh yeah. Okay, fire's out. Well, that was a crappy weld. Let's try this again. Well, that welder sounds as crappy as it could get. That was a terrible weld. But that's good enough. I'm going to grind that down a little bit. It's only just there to hold the cap from moving out of its bore. I'm going to grind this crap off. There's a little bit too much weld there. I don't know why that welder wasn't going stitchy. And to show you what I'm doing here, I'll turn the lamp on. Come on, lamp. I got 4 pairs of gloves on. I've been fluid filming. I buffed the hubs of the brake drum to get them nice and flat. I've got to do a little bit of welding on my exhaust system. What a shame. A little bit of rust back here. Where is it? Let's see if I can patch that hole. I don't think so. This has got a lot of aluminum in it. It's very light. Doesn't lend itself to welding. What a shame. Maybe I'll put some JB Weld in that rust hole, the muffler. But I think this is going to be due for a muffler and 2 tailpipes. Or maybe the fellow will put dual exhaust on. I've been fluid filming it, and it's a very complicated job, fluid filming. You don't just spray, spritz, done, finished. You got to hit it on top of the gas tank in every nook and cranny and spray it to the seams. Fluid film creeps, but it's not an easy job. I'm going to turn off the radio.
At the College of St. Road. You can listen
Check
to
engine.
the media project anytime at WAMC.org.
It is a complicated job, rust-proofing a vehicle. I was at a shop the other day, and the guy was fluid filming a few vehicles. I didn't want to say a word. I just said, "Oh, good work, guys." Except that it wasn't. They were doing a rusty Dodge Ram, then a Ford F, whatever, 350. And they were not doing a good job. The vehicle was already rusty, and they were just spraying fluid film haphazardly. You've got to get it in every nook and cranny, inside the frame, everywhere. It is a very time-consuming job. It does not take a half an hour. It's going to take me 10 hours to do this. First, I blew all the dirt out of all the nooks and crevices and crannies, and I found dirt and stuff everywhere. And the fluid film may not necessarily creep in. It may just act as a dam, the dirt will. So I've sprayed everywhere, and I've watched my Suburban and the former Mrs. X CWs. I just saw her truck today. It kills me. But you've got to spray it everywhere, and you've got to paint on that thicker compound that I have right over here. I've got it right here. This is like wheel bearing grease. You don't want your exhaust system to look like that. That's from the Mercedes, but here's the heavier stuff. And you paint this into the wheel wells. It's just thicker, less tendency to wash off. I'm going to paint that onto all 4 wheel wells, and I'm going to spray this thing to death. Because when you're driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour for hundreds or thousands of miles, this stuff, the salt, splashes everywhere. It gets into everywhere. I'm going to do the brake drums with white grease because fluid film boils off. It doesn't have a high melting temperature. I put some white grease on those things before I tighten things down. I hope to get my pinion angle a bit straighter. I've still got to cut those sockets down and drop my cross member. Got the hubs polished up, the mating surface where the flange of the wheel meets the brake drum. Then I'll put fluid film on it. Something else, I don't know if I mentioned it to you guys, but the cross member originally had bolts with spacers, and they are right there. And those spacers are on the top of the frame to stretch the bolt, and they are not coming off. Are they welded to the frame? What? On my Blazer, they were loose. Well, how do you like that? We got the nuts integral. Oh, I know what it is. I didn't loosen the bolts. Duh. But on this side, it did not have those spacers at all. But it had what looks like factory bolts. It doesn't look like Kmart bolts. They look just like factory bolts in case the transmission was serviced, which I believe it was rebuilt. The fellow told me it was rebuilt. Shifts nice and smooth like a crappy rebuild. I'd put a shift kit in if it were me. One more thing I haven't got time to do. So I'm going to remove these spacers. I'm going to put them under the cross member to drop the transfer case transmission angle to get rid of this stupid pinion angle. It's not going to solve it. This drive shaft is really short, but it's going to improve it like the shims that I put in the axle. I turned the axle up. I lifted the nose of the axle up, and I'm going to drop the back of the transfer case transmission down by using these crapo Chinese sockets that are 3 for $1 or 30 for $1. I'm going to cut off half of it, and I'm going to put longer bolts on. I already have them, grade 8s, a little bit too much. And that way, this spacer will be there. It'll drop the cross member probably 3/4 of an inch. And it'll help things a little bit. So that's my recommendation to the gentleman who's buying this K5 Blazer. Is I would, if they allow it in your state, I would dump this restrictive catalytic converter that I just very carefully reinstalled with the factory strap in the hanger. And it was not in the hanger for years. Don't ask me how it ended up that way, but I fixed it. It hadn't been off in years and years and years and years and years. I would put on factory style dual exhaust, well, not factory style, but a nice dual exhaust system with some nice low restriction mufflers and twin tailpipes, either out the back, straight out the back, or out the side, whatever your preference is. What GM did in these years is they exited underneath the spring shackle and just behind it. And then in the later years, 89, 90, 91, they exited with a different tailpipe that was even with this back of the quarter panel. But in previous years, they had it just under and behind the spring shackle. So that's babble. I've got to get some work done here. My fire's extinguished, and I've got a big blob of grease to put into my tire installation bucket. And tomorrow I'm going to get a Coates tire machine. Enough of that Coates 2020. Served me well I've had that thing since 1981, 35 years, and I bought it. It was an antique, $200. It was actually the first check I ever wrote in my checkbook. I still have it. And I'm not going to get rid of it. I don't get rid of anything. And that is my problem. I've got so much junk. If you want to make a pie or a turkey when you're working on the shop, I'm ready. All right, I got to find the off button and post this video on YouTube. Is that it?